Let's get a quick take on Republican State Senator Tim Neville announcing that he will challenge Michael Bennett in the race for the U.S. Senate. Patty Cahoon from Westward. Now, Tim Neville, I'm sure, is a fine lawmaker and will be a fine candidate, but you know that we're a little desperate right now for candidates if that's making the big headlines right now, that he's the big Republican running for Senate at this point. What do you make of the announcement?
Well, I think it's because the light rail driver outside this studio refused to do it. Now, we've had so many people say they thought about it, they dismissed it, and Neville has been flirting with the idea for a long time and just kind of waiting to be picked, and now at this point, he just got to pick himself because no one else is in.
Amy Oliver Cook, Executive Vice President over the Impens Institute, thank you very much for joining us. What do you think of Tim Neville's chances of getting some more support, even though maybe not a top-tier candidate right now, but could he become one?
Interesting question, but I think that the Bennett campaign is actually going to be looking forward to having a real name. I got a fundraising email from them saying that he's running against Colorado's own Donald Trump, a guy named Robert Blaha. So Tim Neville at least has a little more name recognition. And yeah, there'll be some support. I wouldn't underestimate Tim Neville. He is very smart. But on the other side, he's also attached to some of the more farther right elements of the Republican Party, not really the Cory Gardner type of candidate.
Sure. Penfield Tate joins us, attorney with Qtek Rock. Thank you, and a former state lawmaker. So thank you for being here. Tim Neville, within probably some policy wonks and folks like us that get into politics, know a little bit about his background, things like that. What about the middle part of Colorado that really decides elections statewide? I mean, when they hear Tim Neville, they confuse he might be one of the Neville brothers. Or do you think that he's actually a viable Senate candidate?
Well, that might probably hold him in better stead than his policy. I sort of smiled when Amy said he's kind of attached to some of the more conservative factions and points of view. No. Tim is just that. One thing, he's going to be direct, he's going to be outspoken, he's going to be clear. And the vast majority of Coloradans are going to disagree with him on almost every substantive issue. And so, Patty's right. No one else will step up and run. I think Michael Bennett is probably vulnerable, more vulnerable than he's been in his tenure. But, the GOP bench in the state is just depleted would be an understatement. You've got Tim, who's, I think, stepping up because he may think it's going to be neat. Robert Blaha is, well, I won't even go there. But anyway, it's unfortunate. I think Tim's going to get hammered unless something very bizarre happens, like Donald Trump becomes the presidential nominee. Then it'd be a Donnybrook.
Kara DeGette, editor of the Greater Park Hill News, rounds off the panel for us. Do you think that this is going to be as big of a name that we get from the Republican side, or is there enough time for another name to get in the race? I mean, we're talking. I realize we're still a year away from Election Day, but when we're running a multi-million-dollar statewide campaign, you really can't sit on the sidelines for too much longer if you think you're going to pull off going up against an incumbent. It's not just any race. Is there enough time for somebody else to come off the sidelines?
Well, that's a really good question. I would imagine no at this point. We do have, I think, a couple more months before, that, line is drawn, as it were. But yes, Penn is right. There's just a very small and depleted bench in Colorado at this point. The
Caldera folding chair.
Well, Caldera, Caldera could step up. I have heard, Ryan Frazier and Tim Neville, if this is the best they can do, then that's, unfortunate for the Republicans. It's interesting, though, because I keep getting these fundraising pleas from the Bennett campaign, saying, this is, the most competitive, this is going to be the most competitive race in the country, and please help, step up now, and, we might be in trouble. And I keep thinking, where's the candidate?
Exactly. It's probably the hardest person that's hitting is the fundraising efforts for Michael Bennett saying that there's actual emergency. I get what you're saying.